Christmas, my mother-in-law gave me one of those gifts that is obviously, when I open it, it's one of those gifts that you think, okay, you just needed an extra gift. So you're at Kohl's and you go to that center aisle where they pile all the stuff that nobody really wants, like the wallets and, those types of things. And she got me something, okay?
Okay.
And initially I thought, this is crap, but whatever, I'll give it a shot. I hope.
Did it say as seen on TV?
It did. It said as seen on TV on it, right? And I hope she never hears this podcast. But I looked at it and that was my first thought. You think this is one of those throwaway gifts. But it was a pineapple slice or one of those core pineapple things. Oh. Leigh, have you seen those?
Yeah,
okay.
I've seen
I have not seen this.
Okay. I love pineapple. I'm a big pineapple guy. I always have been. I'm a fan of the pineapple. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot because it always... The problem with pineapple, it's like the baked potato thing. You don't eat baked potatoes because they take so long to actually make them till they taste good, right? So you just don't eat baked potatoes. Yep. I love pineapple. I don't eat pineapple because it takes so long. Mm-hmm.
Right. And canned pineapple really doesn't cut it.
That's not real pineapple. No, that's
just candy.
That's factory pineapple. Yeah. So I took this thing and I wham, bam, bam, like 30 seconds, I was done with a pineapple and it was perfect.
Wow.
I went to the grocery store. I bought 6 pineapples. I sent you a photo of it at the grocery store. Like I'm there, I'm checking out with my pineapples, and I said, "Look, I'm on a big pineapple kick right now." I brought him into work because I was so excited. I was like a pineapple evangelist. I brought it into work, and Tobin I'll go around to the corner to the lunch area, and Tobin has opened up the refrigerator and he's eating my pineapple.
So, there was you had refused to give me any too.
Well, that's because you were being a jerk to me.
Something I said, and you said you don't get any pineapple, so I outsmarted you.
Is that what you call a robber, a thief? Is just outsmarts people?
A fridge thief.
We call cheaters.
But it is a community refrigerator.
This is not what Jesus
You didn't mark it with don't eat.
You know what? That's my problem. I just assumed that people would say, "Oh, I didn't bring that." I guess
no.
You got to put in your name on it, Jeremiah.
Can I label other people's food too? Is that just fair game?
Yeah, work fridge 101. If there's something in the fridge and there's no name on it, it's fair game.
Okay, I didn't know this.
So, obviously you have a problem with pineapple.
I don't think it's a problem. I love pineapple. Is that wrong?
So this would be a good segue for today's show.
Now we're in.
Do you love pineapple?
I love pineapple. But what is our topic, Leigh?
Okay,
what are we talking
thanks.
about?
All right, so we're on. It's Christopher Blackburn, Jeremiah Wentz, Tobin Doobie, and Leigh Bortins, and we're having our first recording in the bomb shelter. Yeah. We are in a nuclear bomb shelter, and my understanding is Jeremiah has never been down here.
No, come at me, all of you.
So I want his reaction recorded live for our listeners. Jeremiah, if you open up the door that's behind you, you'll actually notice that this whole room is concrete.
Go open it. It's crazy.
Turn the light on. There's a switch by your right.
What?
Now go into the next room.
Am I gonna die?
No.
You might.
Do you see that red thing? Just don't push the button. So
there's like a
Oh, we hear the echo on the podcast from the room. Say something else and hear it echo.
Echo!
Yeah, it's pretty tinny, isn't it? All right, shut it all up. I'll explain to you what in the world's going on there.
There's like a fireman's pool back there?
Not quite. It's an ejection rod. What? There's actually a place at the bottom where if you stamp your feet, a big concrete area pushes through the ground so that if the building falls during a nuclear explosion, you can get out.
How do you know that works?
I don't, because we've never, because the guy who built it never used it, and I've never used it.
I just had a great idea for after the show.
Do you see there's a key lock on there? Anyway,
funny.
So Chris has set up a podcasting room for us in the nuclear room, so I almost thought we should change the name of our show. But anyway, let's segue then into our episode on love. It's February, and I thought we could talk about love. And Tobin thought that we should begin by defining some of our terms. So what's the question you want to ask?
I want to know what love is.
I mean, what is love?
Baby, don't hurt me. Are we going to do this the whole time?
Yes.
Okay, I like that. What's love, Tobin?
Sometimes it's the wind beneath your wings.
Oh, my goodness.
Sometimes it stinks. Yeah.
Okay. What's happening? We're already off the rails. We just... When I first told my wife that we were going to be doing this podcast and the topic was love, she about died laughing because she goes, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You and Tobin and Chris, who is single As of what, an hour ago? Is that right? Are you still single?
I'm
So
still
that
single.
hasn't changed.
It hasn't
That's
changed in
been-
the last hour.
Okay. So the three of us and Leigh, rocket scientist, who's a very linear thinker, right?
Yeah.
You know, so you guys are doing this. You guys are doing a podcast
about
on
me?
love? Well, I mean,
Yeah,
you
he
married,
wants to feel
you're
your
married,
love.
so obviously, something I guess
Point's
worked
there.
for you. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, she's like, you got three guys and you have Leigh. What in the world are you guys? Is it a call-in show? I'm like, no, it's not a call-in show. You
No.
are staying out of this.
It'd probably be funnier if it was a call-in show.
Yeah, but if our wives don't call in, then we
Mm-hmm.
have freedom to make ourselves as romantic as we want.
But what
That's
is?
true.
I think if we really play with the definition of love, then maybe we'll sound more qualified. It's
With your voice, go
all
for
in
it.
how you define your terms.
Yeah, with his voice. Okay, so we had some songs from pop culture. What about, what do you really think?
Well, culture likes to talk about. I mean, I throw that out for a joke, but there are many definitions of love circulating through popular media because it's kind of a poorly defined. And Christopher's
Saying you got to get closer to this.
to the microphone.
Yeah, closer
Love
to
the
mic.
microphone,
Yeah, love the,
Love the
yeah.
microphone.
Take-
That's actually
get close.
That was helpful. But there's sort of a plethora of definitions of love out in popular songs and media, but all of them are very vague.
Well, let's go to scriptures. Let's start there. Because what about the verse that says, we love because he first loved us? Does that help us to know what love is? Oh, how about this? Your guys are dads. There's no greater love than to lay down your life for a friend. What about your families? Are you laying down your life?
Yeah.
How does that relate to love?
These are deep. Well, there's deep things to think about. This might be kind of a quiet podcast.
Mhm. They are.
I think one of the issues is we're very limited by our word love. There's some 30 or 40 words for love in Greek, aren't there?
Well, I think. Well, there's four important ones.
There's
in
four
Greek,
important ones,
which
but they
we'll get
use
to.
lots of other
There are
ones,
other
don't
ones
they? And they all mean different things. But my point is that like you're liking something or appreciating something, you might use the word love there in English, whereas they would have a very specific
Pineapple
word for
there.
that.
Thank you. There was
Admire, desire. There's all kinds.
Yeah, we've got words like that, but I think we use the word love to mean all of them.
Yeah.
So it's a flawed English language problem we have with love. So it'd be better to maybe get a picture of it. So when the Bible says God is love, maybe you look at his characteristics and if we're creating his image and we're supposed to image that, would that maybe give us a fuller definition instead of saying love is da-da-da-da? Because I think we all agree, like love in today's culture is really cheapened, right? And you see that in all the comedies, all the sitcoms are making fun of guys bumbling around, being idiots. I mean, it's all the songs are don't really talk about. I think when you hear love songs on the radio, you don't really have a clear picture of who God is.
Well,
That's probably not right.
They're mostly talking about romantic love as an experience, really not as a definition, and not any broader than
It's
the
a-
initial romantic love.
Yeah, it's just a feeling.
Yeah, which is a good thing to write a song about, perhaps.
that's
but
fine.
it's troubling that that's
The only
dominates
thing.
so many of our songs.
Right. That's true. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with any of the definitions. It's when it's the only one you know. That's the problem.
Oh,
So we have,
That's good.
so in the scriptures, you have eros, right? Erotic love, referring more to physical things, and agape, sacrificial love, and Philadelphia, something. I'm saying that wrong. That's the city of brotherly
Philia.
love. Philia. Yeah, it seems like there's a fourth one that Lewis talks about in the book, The Four Loves. Do you know what?
Storge,
Which means
affection,
affection.
and it's the one that's the hardest to remember because it's all around us. It's the natural affections of a parent and child, or of members of a family, or members of a community,
Or even like between your pets and yourself, and
between your
like
pets and yourself.
sports, or
It's-
not.
It's just that you are habituated to this person. Like we have you go to work at the same place with them.
We're like 5 minutes in the podcast, and you've already said plethora and habituated.
I know a lot of words, Jeremiah.
Apparently
loves words.
He
I do,
loves, you
and the thing
love
is, I do love words. I think that I'm not overusing the word love when I say that I love words.
How did you prepare for this podcast? What did you do?
I
Did you
printed
watch a
out-
bunch of romantic movies?
No.
Tell me, you play Scrabble?
Well, romantic movies are all pretty much the same, but I did write out the Four Loves. That's why I knew Storge.
Ah, you looked. Some
And,
research.
I'm not impressed anymore.
And I did some. I printed out some other things that we'd been talking about for in case, this conversation falls silent.
That's good. That's good.
Okay, so we still don't have a definition of love except to say there's a lot of variations of it.
Okay. So I'll throw out a definition. Let's see. I love words in that words move me. I spend time seeking further knowledge of words, and I work to include them in my daily discourse. Like I just said, discourse instead of conversation. It's like I enjoy working bigger and more obscure words into a conversation.
You are such a homeschooler.
It's not. I don't think it's to make myself sound smart. I think it's because I enjoy the feel of the word in my mouth.
You feel like you're saying more in so many ways.
Yeah.
It's expansive to have expanded vocabulary.
Well, that might be loving something for its utility, not for itself. And I think I really just enjoy the way the word sounds, and I want to hear it.
So if you only knew 2 of them, you'd be happy saying them over and over again?
Perhaps, but I'd probably love them enough to come up with more ones.
Do you think the definition of love has changed like over the last 75 years or so in the way that we see it as a society?
I think how it's applied has changed.
Vernacularly,
Yeah, the way it's popularly used. I mean, I don't know. I'm not 75, but I can think of other words that have changed like a whole lot. Like just, I mean, not that we have to go there, but just the word marriage. It used to mean something it doesn't mean anymore, right? And polygamy. Now we have serial polygamy, and nobody thinks anything of it. In fact, when I was researching, I was just looking up all kinds of things and noted that I forgot what year it was. Early part of the last century, when Utah became a state, they were denied statehood unless they would write in their constitution that polygamy was against the Constitution. And then every state afterwards had to include that in their constitutions. And I was thinking that, obviously nobody cares about that anymore. So who even defines our terms of love and how it actually gets manifest? And as we as the church allowed our secular culture to change even our definitions, or are we working hard in such a way that they still admire our definitions?
Well, what do you think of my definition of that I enjoy it and work to make it a part of my life?
Well, people would say that about all kinds of perversions. So I guess I don't accept that as a definition.
Okay. Yeah.
How about you, Jeremiah? Do you have a definition?
I don't know. I was just curious. I pulled up Google and said, "What is love?" And of course, we have
that you went to Google.
I go to Google. What's my like instead of what, the Bible? That's okay. I see what you're saying. I don't appreciate it. I don't know if there is a clear definition of love on here. 13 million people think that Hathaway has it with their big hit, right? Baby Don't Hurt Me. But I would say you have to look at it. I started like 4 sentences there. I'm gonna finish one.
One of them.
Okay. I feel like it's very difficult to explain like 1 or 2 sentences. So I think you have to look at larger picture stories to get a full idea of all the way that. Well, like for example, if you look at love stories in the Bible. Okay, or throughout culture, but let's pull from the Bible, right? Because everything originates there, and that's where we see the essence of who God is, and God is love. So obviously, you have God sending His Son Jesus to die for us. Greater love has no man than this. So there's that, but then you also have the stories, which is kind of where I think we really connect and relate as humans. When we see stories of like Jacob, who sees Laban's daughter Rachel at the well and says, "Here, I have to have her, so I'm willing to sacrifice for 7 years." And then, Laban, whose name means trickster, right? He tricks him with Leah, and you guys know the story. So he works another 7 years just to get the girl that he loves. So that type of sacrifice, that's one picture of it that you see in that story.
I call it devotion.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Devotion.
Devotion is good. Yeah.
What made you think of that word, Chris?
Just it's an application of love over a longer period of time. It's the outworkings of that, and I think that's one of the things that I was thinking about earlier when we were talking about. I said 30 about Greek. I don't know where I pulled that number from. I think there's 6. I looked it up.
Might be thinking
6 or 7
words for snow in Inuit.
Who knows? That could be where I pulled that from.
It's one of those languages where they have more words for a thing. That's just like that's the example you go to.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
I'm doing it again. I just thought I was explaining a fact that we all love, but really I'm just bringing my own love of language.
I know. I think it's fascinating, and that's one of the things that Leigh was. So Leigh was talking about how our culture kind of is affecting our definitions, and I started thinking about how you have manuscripts and documents, and let's just talk legal for a bit. Whenever you're talking about the definition of a word and what its application is, so what is this thing? What is assault? What is that? You have to look to where there is jurisprudence, where there is application of that word, and it has been ruled on in the past. And so when you're using common vernacular, like we might think, for instance, assault is when you hit somebody or you attack somebody, but the legal definition of assault is just unwanted contact. It's not that whole big thing that we associate with the word. And so with love, right, when we're looking at what is God, and it's God is love, you have to understand what was their connotation for that word. What did they mean when they said God is love? Not what do we mean when we hear God is love? Because love in our culture is something very, very different.
From scriptural love?
Yeah, and it changes. It changes constantly. Vernacular, what we use in our language day to day is going to change every couple of years. It used to be like people were saying that's popping, Jeremiah. Now people say it's lit.
I say that all the time. That's
I don't
lit,
say either.
fam.
Yeah.
I don't even know what you mean.
It's dank. Is that a word too?
Yeah, dang.
So devotion, though, the extension of it.
But yeah, so for that one, you're talking about that the application of love over that long period of time where he's working for the daughter for 7 years. Yeah, that was devotion. And so I think most of the examples that I grew up with thinking of what is biblical love were more like that. They're more in line with laying down your life over a period of time, over, like to actually give something of yourself for someone with no expectation of return. And that is love. Not just, I have this gushy, warm feeling and I like pineapple. Every time I get it, I'm happy.
Okay, first of all, don't knock the pineapple.
No,
I don't
it's
appreciate
a different
that.
kind of love.
It is different. It is different.
So even though you brought up originally that when Becky said, all of us are talking and singled out that Chris was single, and I thought, well, there we go. Because single people know what love is too and are loved, right? But we always go to romantic coupled love.
Infatuation.
Right.
Infatuation, good.
And let me step in here with a disclaimer. My wife is she was being facetious, of course. And,
no.
We know.
Everybody understands that because she is she's absolutely fantastic in our relationship and helping remind me what love is.
No, I thought it was hilarious too. I thought it was absolutely absurd that we were going to talk about love. I was like, okay, well, this is happening now.
It was absurd about yourself, you mean? You were right there.
Yeah.
But we all want to be loved.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I do think that stories, though, kind of give a bigger picture of like what love is rather than trying to use words. You know what I mean? I think, at least for me, when I see a love story played out, then I go, okay, now I understand love from maybe a different angle that I hadn't before. Like you can see, for example, okay, let's say it like this. If I see the definition of love as saying commitment to someone, through the ups and downs of life, unswerving devotion, maybe devotion to be with them, that's okay. That means one thing. But then when I watch Up, the Pixar movie. And I see that whole opening sequence where they're going through, and it just like the guys at Pixar say, "Okay, let's sucker everybody in and make them think they're going to watch like a happy Pixar movie." And then, bam! Like all of a sudden, you have like the husband, Ellie, right? Is the wife?
I think so.
And they're going through this. They're going through they meet together as kids. They have this common dream that they share. We want to travel to this place. We'll do it as we get older. They're never quite able to. They go through a miscarriage together. Then she gets sick, and they say, "Here, we're going to finally save up our money and go." And then she dies, and you think, the emotions that you feel going through that are just incredible. So that gives you a whole different picture. I just think stories help me understand what love is a lot more than definitions.
I think that's true of everything. I think stories help. are the better way to understand a lot of things than
That's why Christ used them to teach.
Or they're at least on level with definitions, if they're not more important. I'm maybe not prepared to defend that claim, but they're at least.
I think
because the stories can be misinterpreted if the key words aren't understood by everybody, right? So it's a both and thing.
That's why you can have conversations and argue with people because you never actually define the clear bottom underlying terms. But I think with stories, you captivate. There are emotions that are translated. So like with the up story you just told, I could feel it in my gut, like as he's talking about it, that sense of loss, that sense of you've been with this person all this time, and you've grown to love the things that they loved, like he did, right? He wanted to travel because he loved Ellie, and Ellie wanted to travel, and now he's living out her dreams because it's the last thing that he has of her.
Yeah.
And everyone can relate to that feeling in some way. Everyone has felt that sort of loss.
Right.
Well, let me give it to you. I'll give you a different example and see what you think of this. So, a lot of people, your guys, I don't know if you watched A Walk to Remember, and
Mandy Moore,
right? Yes. And so so he marries Jamie, and then she dies. Well, in Ravi Zacharias's I don't know if it's a sermon that he wrote or just a speech he read from, he talks about that maybe being played out a little differently, where there's a couple who are very much in love and one realizes they're going to die. They have cancer, and they ask him should they get married or not because they know the time will be so short. And he's like, you can get married. I won't tell you not to. But think of what you're robbing the one who you're leaving behind. They will not have a spouse that they can say they loved one and only for the rest of their life. And that so there's a sacrifice the one that's dying can give to the other one, so that their first time with somebody is their only time with somebody. And see, in a world that thinks polygamy is okay, serial or otherwise, divorce or otherwise, that doesn't resonate with them. They're like, no, let's do the romantic thing and have sex with her and be married to her and let her die and then go on and have someone else without really thinking about the eternal picture of it. So what do you think about that?
Well, interestingly, I would, without knowing, I don't know the context of what Dr. Zacharias was saying, but just based on what you said there, I actually don't share his concern because as an Orthodox Christian, I believe that marriage is eternal. The teaching of the Eastern Church is that when you marry in your mortal life, you are married for eternity. That's why there's very little remarriage in the Orthodox Church.
And so you would say they could get married and then she'd just not get married ever again because that was eternal.
Right. Right. And
now, wait a minute.
They're going to be separated.
Hold up. They're going to be. Hold on.
I would not like that answer.
Mark 12. Doesn't Jesus talk about that? Where he says, marriage is not eternal. You go to heaven. I mean, doesn't Jesus address that?
No, he says they neither marry nor are given in marriage.
Okay.
In heaven. Because that's what they were actually
married.
Yeah. So the Pharisees were actually asking about earthly marriages going on into heaven.
There's an established bond there,
Yeah.
so you'd think it would that bond would still exist if you're the same being, if you're the same person in heaven, then you're going to have the same sort of bond with these people. So what is that? What does that mean?
Right.
How does that look in heaven?
But the other point that he was trying to make is it wasn't like my husband died and I'm in my 50s and I get married again. That there's something incredibly special about young love. The children that are born from that, they'll have consistent parents for the entire time. And what was being lost by that?
Yeah.
So
that's huge,
right? And so this is not and where he wouldn't tell him don't get married. Just think about all the ways it affects you because you're not going to be around and somebody else is, right? So being projective is really difficult when you're in love. You're so emotional, and it's so about the moment.
Okay, so I guess I don't necessarily disagree that there is something being lost there. I mean, of course,
but I wouldn't say that I agree that what's being lost there is necessarily good to maintain. I think that there's so much heartache in life, and so much of it colors and adds flavor to what is our existence. And so,
in good and bad ways, right?
Yeah, right. And so you hear people that have troubles in their past, but it much defines who they are, and sometimes strengthens who they become. And having for instance, in that situation, if they got married, if they had chosen to get married, and they did have a child, like that child may grow to know the mother and the mother may not live through their whole childhood, but they'll have known and had that love in their life.
Sure.
And what is that significance of that? Like, it's still just as valid. It's not to be just thrown away. That was a mistake all around. Like, no, the love would still exist and be very valuable.
I'd be curious to define what exactly is being lost when a parent dies, because that is, I would expect that impacts a child in a different way than a parent not wanting to live with them anymore.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess my point in all that is to say that love is costly, and it takes some real thought, and it takes some energy, and it takes counsel to actually be sure that you know what love is, especially when you're about to make a major decision and love seems to be what you're responding to just make sure that it's not the emotion of the day, or even lust could be affecting that too. Okay, so with the Orthodox, what you brought up, let's ask you another question. This relates to, I want to hear your answers to this, Tobin. So if marriage is sacred, so we may not agree on that, but I would say if marriage is sacred, then why isn't it a sacrament to Protestants? Aren't sacred things exhibited and symbolized through sacrament? I know as an Orthodox, you're going to say, yes, of course. You treat it that way, right? In your church?
Yes.
Yeah. Any Catholics here? We're all at Protestant churches, right?
Protestant.
Right. So why is it not a sacrament?
No, go back a little bit and say what do you mean by sacred? I think that.
Maybe we have to define sacred.
Is part of this answer.
Yes. So I would say marriage is an institution created by God, and it reflects the church and the bride of Christ, and anything else is less and not real. But he uses it to point to reality, which is him being the groom. Right. And that's what makes it sacred.
Anything less being like two Christians who aren't married but are living.
No, or even two seculars who are married. If they don't know what they're representing. They have no idea of the commitment they've made or what it symbolizes or represents and why it's sacred.
Is their marriage still sacred even if they don't know?
I would say it is, even if they don't know. But then will they treat it that way if they don't know?
Interesting. And we have to ask, how are they married, right? Are they being married in the sense that they're legally bound together? Are they being married in the sense like what is your definition and basis for marriage? Because people can coexist together in relationships without any sort of religious background, but they've now attributed that the label marriage, which was I think a Christian label, to it. So then you have to ask, are they actually married, or are they just using a cultural term to apply it, and they're not actually married,
or even a legal term, right? That's just a hangover for something else. Yeah. So that was one of my other questions here. So according to the Bible, who's married? I will throw out, and then you can argue about this. So I'm going to throw out a bunch of stuff that relate to this. One is a marriage required a covenant of some kind, usually a contract between families. But the individuals also could be part of that. Marriage required a community to witness it and to support it, and it required consummation, right? So there was an actual fleshy union, and now they were one and one flesh. So nobody went and got a license. Nobody got tax deductions because of it. The state was not involved. When I first became a Christian, the thing that bothered me the most, and I was new married, is I kept thinking, I had this idea of marriage being just so sacred and in a secular way, not in a Christian way. And I was like, how did the early pioneers in America, which have always interested me, if they didn't see a pastor for 3 or 4 years, how did they get married? Well, then as I read the scriptures, I realized, having the state come and sanction you and a pastor pray over you is not even in the scriptures. Yep. It's a totally different situation. So Christian marriage today has so embraced a secular definition and a secular process that how much of our own marriages aren't sacred in the sense of a symbol, a sacrament, and they could be that way. They could be pointing to Christ instead of where we are now, where every bride loves her wedding, but we all hate our marriages. And what is the church doing to help that or hurt it? That's a lot right there.
Yeah,
that's a lot in there.
Are you saying that clergy didn't have to be present in like Old Testament marriages?
Yeah, it would have been the fathers.
It would have been the community.
Yeah. Now, I am sure if their community included judges, elders, leaders, sure, that they were part of it somehow.
But it's not spoken about as if it's normative.
Yeah.
And interestingly, that is it is part of the Orthodox Church, Church of England, and I think the Catholic Church, that marriage is a sacrament, but it is the one sacrament that is actually enacted by the recipients. The minister is a witness, or is actually called the celebrant in the Church of England. He's there to celebrate the marriage, but it's enacted by the people who are receiving it. And so that I think that touches on how can are people who were only legally married and didn't have a church ceremony, is their marriage valid? And actually, Augustine talked about this, not in that situation, but in situations where certain priests apostatized and it said, we're no longer Christian. And then people who had been married by those priests wondered, have we now been living in fornication all these years? And that's how he helped develop that part of theology, that no, you enacted the sacrament.
Because they had the sacrament. I mean, they had the covenant, the consummation, and then hopefully somehow included their community. This is one of the reasons I've always felt bad about folks that won't have a wedding ceremony and say it's just a paper. In one way, they're right, because they're saying it is just a paper. It's from the state. Yeah. Why is the state doing that anyway? But what they're missing is it's not the paper. You have the wedding ceremony so that your community can say yay or nay to this. You have the bands and the announcement so they can stop you beforehand. Does anybody do that anymore? Say 4 weeks out, hey, anybody think this is a bad idea before we do this?
Yeah, you put it as a little little byline in the ceremony. Hey, if you speak now, forever hold your peace. And a lot of ceremonies, the last several that I've been to, have even removed that line.
The only time you ever see the objection made is in a movie where it's made by a very malicious person,
or it's a comedy scene,
or it's the ex-boyfriend who's come back to declare his love and she leaves him.
Well, it might be a comedy, but someone's being malicious. I haven't seen this done where it's not. You know, like the groom waited this whole time.
Like Runaway Bride. She's sitting there and she's looking at him the whole time, and finally he speaks up, and then she's like, "Yeah, I was hoping you would stop this marriage." You know,
Can we get more of those voices? Yeah. That was good. Was that really such a big? I'm stuck on what you were saying, Leigh, about how people would have to wait years before a minister or justice of the peace.
No, they wouldn't. That was in my mind, thinking that they would do that, and then I thought, no, they wouldn't do that. They just get married and call themselves husband and wife, and then the more I looked into it, whenever the preachers on horseback would travel around, then they'd go ahead and have a ceremony or get a blessing, but they knew they were married. It was just a blessing from the bigger community.
I think the cool thing about that is just what you said about how what a community thing marriage is supposed to be, and the support you're supposed to have, because it's not just a decision by two people. It's a decision by anyone who's involved in those two people in their lives. To say we commit to help these two remain in faithful union, encouraging and building each other up for the good of the community.
One time a young man was in a wedding, and I asked him what his role was going to be, and he said, "I'm the groomsman." And I said, "Which groomsman are you?" And he was a Christian who was pretty well educated. He was about 17, 18 at the time. And he looked at me and said, "Wow, I hadn't put any thought to that at all." So we call him groomsman. Without recognizing that Christ is the groom that you're the man of. So
that's interesting, because you, that's right. That's right. Where Christ calls us the bride.
So I really want to hear why you all think it's not a sacrament in the Protestant church.
I have no idea. It's never made sense to me. I think it's crazy, but that's, just me not liking all the things Protestants do and not wanting to also be Orthodox, so I'm kind of trapped.
Well,
yeah, you are.
On a weird spot.
Yeah.
You could be Anglican, I guess.
Yeah, I could be Anglican.
Well, our church acts like they're Anglican half the time.
They do. So.
Yeah. Okay, so it doesn't make sense to you. Give me an argument why it should be then, Chris.
Why it should be? Yeah, why? Yeah, why'd you say?
So in the case of marriage, right? I'd say that the term, when I think term marriage, I think of the legal definition. I don't think of the actual, Christian definition of what a marriage is. And so, I've joked with close friends, we should just get married and then we can totally get all the tax benefits and we'll never even see each other. We'll live in different states. It'll be fine. Whatever.
Absolutely. That's what I told William and Alec when the homosexual laws came in. I said, you two should marry each other for tax benefits and then marry your girls in the church.
I actually think in North Carolina, it's not the thing that was legalized a few years ago was not marriage, but civil unions. I think the wording is. Am I correct in that?
They're different in each state. Each state has its own laws on how that happened. Now, I don't know if any federal laws or Supreme Court rulings have changed that. I don't pay attention to that stuff really.
That was a thing people were up in arms. A lot of my friends were up in arms about. It's gay marriage. It's civil unions. It's if my mom and my wife's mom eventually have no husband and want to live together and share rent, be able to sign contracts and hold an insurance policy together and make decisions for each other in the hospital because they're living with each other until they both die at this point. That is what the civil union includes. It could also include men who want to have sex with each other, but that's not what it's specifically for. And I was troubled that people didn't understand that.
Yeah, it's all legal. It's all taxes, and I don't understand why people are so opposed or like they're trying to get involved in it. The only issue that I have with any of that is when it encroaches on religious freedoms, where you're telling a pastor you have to marry these people, you have to acknowledge their union religiously because they asked you to. If that's ever in question, then I think that's an issue of religious freedom. Beyond and outside of that, do what you want. You're free people. Like I'm.
And guess what? Sinners sin. They don't expect to have the church verify the things that they do. So
I think the to be fair, I think the argument is that some of them do because churches are pretty and they want to have their relationship validated in a pretty ceremony at a church, and because the terms matrimony and legal marriage have been so confused, a lot of Christians, when this was being voted on, were worried that it would lead to an issue of religious freedom.
Right.
So as a predominantly Protestant country, whether we are now anymore or not, we didn't value marriage as sacred, as a sacrament.
Right.
If we valued it, if it was sacred, we would have had some sort of ceremonial thing that was the sacrament you had to do. And I think maybe in one time we did, but it diminished so much because we weren't told all the time, like you were in the Catholic or Orthodox church, that this is sacred.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily that. I mean, when the Protestant church, you're talking about the Council of Trent back in the 16th century, right?
I'm really talking about just now and
recently,
how the words have gotten to be, it's almost like, you said you loved words. It's almost like they've all become goo. They don't mean anything anymore.
Right. Well, I was going to say that the Protestant church, when they define sacraments, they say there are basically two, right? Mm-hmm. There's baptism and communion. Baptism and communion are the two. So they say everything else is, what they say, a sacrament is a visible sign of invisible grace. And so those are the two that they clarified. So other stuff like, confirmation, marriage, they just didn't classify as being such, because baptism, communion are the only two that are commanded by Christ in the Bible.
Well, do you think that's why? I haven't studied enough about the Reformation to know.
I mean,
so if it's specifically from
I don't know. It could be.
So specifically from this is what all of us are commanded to do, and they left it at that. If you're not commanded, then it wasn't considered a sacrament.
I believe that's the way that they structure things.
Well, we obviously don't know enough about this, but we're asking questions that we want our listeners to think about.
Yeah, that's really interesting to look into there. Yeah. Because if you're talking about definition of visible sign of invisible grace, marriage definitely kind of fits with that, you know. But it's true, Jesus never commanded be married. Matter of fact, Paul said the opposite. It's better if you don't.
Right.
So, and I think as a church. Go ahead.
You know what it is? Well, you're tricking this thought for me. So in Orthodox and Catholic Church there are 7 sacraments, but only. So you have. I'll go ahead and tell you what they are. There's communion, baptism, chrismation or confirmation. It's a church membership thing that may be enacted in the same ceremony as baptism, or it might be later. And there's marriage, ordination, extreme unction, and is that 7? Did I say 7 of them? Communion, baptism, chrismation, confirmation, confession. That's the other one. Yeah. That's the other one. Confession, ordination, extreme unction, and marriage.
Because we were all told to repent, and confession's not one. But go ahead.
So right. We were all commanded to repent.
We are. That's an all.
So that was that. Yeah, that maybe blows a hole in that theory as to why it happened this way. But some of the sacraments are for everybody, and some of them are not. Not everyone's going to get married. Not everyone is going to be ordained. And some people may die before a priest can administer extreme unction to them, and that's okay. They're not going to go to hell for the want of that sacrament. So I had a theory that maybe Protestants only imported the ones that are for everybody, but no, because confession.
Well, but you could say confession is wrapped up in baptism, though.
You could
So you
take
can be baptized.
you could take confirmation as being wrapped up in it because it's a sign of your membership in the church. How would you take confession as it being wrapped up in baptism?
I'm just saying you're not going to be baptized until you've already confessed that you're a sinner.
Well, no.
Oh, no, because confession is an ongoing.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And
I'm
also,
with you. I'm with you now.
Little
Gotcha.
babies who are baptized aren't confessing anything either.
Well,
so.
that's slightly different. Then
I think it was because of corruption, and they were afraid of the priest holding it over them in the community.
Maybe.
I think it was more for the political reasons than it was for actual religious reasons, and that's why it was cast out.
Yeah, you could argue whether the babies are really being baptized anyway, or whether that's just a statement
an argument
by the parents.
Yeah.
Which is not today's conversation.
Yeah, but
It's
can
on
I say that I
marriage.
love having this conversation?
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you love
Right back
having
in.
a conversation.
Yeah, so we have actually, just by the way, who do we have around we have, you're a Presbyterian, Leigh. Christopher is you're kind of seeking, sounds like, decisions that are still open for you.
I'm around.
And Jeremiah, you're contemporary Baptist?
Yeah, I mean, I'm evangelical, charismatic, you could say. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my background.
That's a good group.
Yep. And I was actually, and Tobin and I have had some really good conversations about this. Leigh and I have had some good conversations as well. Chris, I never talked to, but I feel like
he has to get past Chris to talk to me.
that's right. Your desk is in between us. Yeah. But no, so yeah, I was on staff at a charismatic evangelical church for 12 years. I was a worship pastor and associate pastor. So yeah, that's my background there. So slightly different, slightly less orthodox than
Ours is really liturgical where we attend. It's very orthodox.
Yeah.
All right. So lots of questions that we're not going to answer till we do more research and pray.
Because that wraps up that question. We don't know.
We don't know. But I have another one then for you. You three as men, would you arrange your children's weddings?
Not
the weddings. Their marriage. Sorry. Yeah.
Not their
marriages
weddings
are coming back.
That's for
arranged.
that's for someone else.
Anything to
I
do
have
with
to
the
tell
wedding.
you, I went to Tobin's wedding, and it was one of the nicest weddings I've ever been to. I still remember
cool.
that day. So anyway,
How much do you have to do with that, Tobin?
Not much.
There you go. Would I arrange, you're asking, of course, would we arrange the marriage, the spouse?
I mean, it's more of a Old Testament kind of biblical way to go about it. Would you be willing? Would your kids be willing?
My answer now is different than it would have been years ago. I knew this girl named Shirley who was from India, and she was part of an arranged marriage or going to be married. It was in college, and she would never date, and she was attractive. Guys were interested in her, and she just said, no, I'm not going to date anyone because when I go back home, my parents have a guy for me. And I thought that's really interesting. So I asked her a lot of questions because it was really fascinating, not just that the practice still existed today, but that she was excited about it. And she said, well, think about it. Look, who knows me better than my parents do? She says, they know me. She says, I don't trust myself. If I know anything about myself, it's that my heart is prone to making a lot of mistakes. And so my parents know me better and they can see more than I have. They have a bigger picture, so I completely trust them. Why wouldn't I love that?
And it's almost like you could have the opportunity for courtship still. It's just after you are united in marriage.
Yeah, I mean,
matrimony, I guess.
So I guess there are a lot of well, let me go back. I'm dodging the question. To answer your question, no, I would not. I see the benefits of it, and I don't want to just completely throw it out in a way that I may be used to. But I would not, because I still feel like it's better to raise my kids to love God, serve God, hear the voice of the Holy Spirit, and follow His leading in that way.
But if they asked you to do it, you would? If
they asked me to do it, then I would absolutely do it. But that would be their choice. I guess I would say I'm going to give them that choice and that ability.
Okay. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't not do it. Do you quick before that though, Chris? Do you have a response to Jeremiah?
I do. I don't think it's going to be possible or very feasible unless you can find a significant amount of people that are also willing to set their children up with you and force them into the marriage.
There's a whole culture like the Indians still are.
I mean, you have to find a culture of people that are also willing to make that arrangement with you. So it'd be very difficult to enter into. But I do see.
Stop. We had 2019 now. We have the internet. You could easily find that culture.
You could. Find
I was going to say, I think it's making that kind of mindset's making a comeback.
Right.
There's so many people wanting and longing and desperate for significant relationships that mean something, like especially in my generation, that I think they might buck back against the system. And I mean, we've moved towards, you don't go and meet people by your friends. You have a machine that'll find the people that you like and tell you which people you actually are suited for, like your parents would have.
Yeah, like how soon is it?
Why would a machine do a better job than your parents?
Just follow the algorithm, right? I just feel like as long as we have furry conventions, then we're going to have, no problem finding other people. I think the problem is going to be more people who are willing to pay a dowry, because really they kind of go hand in hand, right? The arranged marriages.
Do you have to have a dowry if you arrange a marriage?
I kind of feel like that's part of the deal, isn't it?
No, I feel like that's
Jeremiah.
I feel like that's tangential.
Well, no, because I'll tell you this.
Why do you think that?
It's the whole no guy is good enough for my daughter mentality, right? But if you throw in like 12 cows, then I'll consider it.
Right. But that dowry becomes the bride's property in the event that the husband dies.
So I actually had an interesting conversation with a buddy of mine about 2 weeks ago, who a friend of his is part of a large dowry culture. And he said that they have a big problem in that culture now with pregnancies outside of wedlock. And he said, of course they do. Yeah, I said, of course. Because, I mean, they don't think through the repercussions of that. You want to hold to this dowry system, but the parents don't want to pay the money. And so the kids aren't getting married. And so, you have a lot of, kids do what kids do, and there you go.
Right.
I don't know that the dowry's inherent to the contract, though.
So you would say...
And let me say the word covenant, but it's a contract is what it is. But go ahead.
Pros of the arranged marriages, what would they be?
Dating is terrible.
I mean, somebody is going to help you form your choices in that. So it's going to be either that machine, your friend, your coworkers, your family. Right. So they're all going to, and maybe all of them are going to help influence you on that. So what is wrong with saying family members? It might be your grandmother or your cousin or I tell my kids, if your brothers do not like who you bring home, do not marry her. Don't listen to your mom and dad. Listen to them, because they have to live with her too, because it's such a family event to get married.
So in that way, you would say accountability could be part of it too, right? Because everybody's invested. We all brought this person in, so we're all more invested in making sure that your marriage succeeds.
Yeah. That's why I said, so I think that's why community is one of the 3 C's of marriage, is the community's got to be behind it.
Go through your 3 C's again.
Some sort of covenant, some sort of community, and some sort of not some sort of definite consummation.
Got it. Okay.
Well, it could be some sort of.
That's good.
Sure.
A disability.
Sure.
So I was in Africa when I was 16, and there was a team that I was part of, was a missions group there, and we were walking through the markets, and one of the shopkeepers stopped, and he goes, "Hey," he said, "that girl right there." He said, "I'll give you 1 cow for her." And I said, "Dude, what are you talking about?" No. And he said, 2 cows. And I said, "No, I'm not." And I'm like, "Get a load of this. You for real? This guy's."
He was trying to marry her to you?
I was in. No, he wanted me to sell him this girl who was a teammate of mine on this missions team.
Oh, he thought you had that authority.
You weren't even together. He just assumed because you're the man.
He said that he looked at me. I walk with an air that make people respect me. So that's obviously what happened.
You're
right?
A tall guy.
Yes, absolutely tall, freakishly good looking, and athletic. And he saw me and he said,
"She wasn't."
I will offer him 2 cows for that girl. And I said, "No, not 2 cows." And he goes, 3 cows. And I said, "No." And I started to walk off, and he stopped, and he comes running after me. He goes, "Hey, 4 cows, final offer." And another shopkeeper is standing there, and he started laughing, and he goes, "You're crazy." He said, "No woman is worth 4 cows." And we had a lot of fun with that story with that girl and the rest of the girls on the trip. It was just a great story, but it reminded me this culture is still out there. Now that's different from the arranged marriage culture, I understand, and that's a little, somewhat related, but still.
That's a good point though, because at least our perception, at least, and maybe the reality, is that arranged marriages often are attached to a culture of male chauvinism.
And is that inherent?
Is
not?
that an inherent connection,
think
or
it
are they
is.
both just old-fashioned?
So I know that I was in a conversation with extended family members at a reunion probably 20 years ago, and an arranged marriage from a friend of a friend kind of thing came up. And one of my aunts looked at me and she said, would you have been okay if your dad arranged your marriage? Like, that was just a ridiculous thing, was the tone of her voice. And I said, my father has only loved me and never harmed me. Why would I think he'd do a bad job? Mm. And like all those people just kind of stopped. They didn't know what to say to that.
Yeah, so you feel like, I mean, I guess here's my position on it. I would say that I'm 100% in favor of arranged marriages as long as each family is behind it. And more importantly than that, each family loves and has a relationship with God, right? And desires to follow him. Because outside of that, it's going to fail. But if you have, like you said, you're a parent who really loves you, cares about you, then why would you not trust that? But at the same time, how do we get away from assigning some sort of value on our child compared to their spouse, right? In arranged marriage. Because you're looking at it and saying, here, does that person stack up to mine?
I think you're thinking arranged in economics. Yeah. I'm thinking arranged in the sense, Mom and Dad, there's these 3 or 4 guys that I've looked at, and you know some people. Who do you think's best for me?
Well, right. Even there, I think that's exactly how most of the dating system works, Jeremiah. Like you look at other people and you equate value in what they do or how they look or something about this person. You're determining whether or not this person is a valuable match for you.
And people do arrange dates for each other.
Right.
And they say things like, he's not good enough for you, or So if all courtship methods do involve some kind of economic comparison between the people, then that may not be what we are arguing about.
It may not be where you put value,
marriage.
But yeah, I'd say the majority of them have that component. There's this issue of whether or not you're going to have stability in your marriage, you're going to be financially able to sustain that marriage.
And
is that putting those things above love, or are those things part of love?
I think that they dictate whether or not you're going to open yourself to love.
Question. That's a good question. Because is love?
Because back to our definition, what is it?
If you're going to say that those aren't part of love, then what definition of love are you using? Because I don't think of those things as being part of love. Uh-huh. However, if I'm going to argue that, I'm going to have to define love as a feeling.
Right, and you don't want to do that, do you?
And I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Or I mean, I believe that, but I believe that that's not a comprehensive definition, right?
Well, you also have to think about cognitive dissonance. So I could enter into the same conversation with 2 or 3 different people, and their personalities could be completely identical. But if they presented themselves completely different to me, I would perceive them very differently. So if you come up to me and you're messy, kind of smelly, and you're kind of loud, I'm probably not going to listen to you, probably going to not feel as much of a connection with you during that conversation. That said, if someone came over and they were attractive and they smelled good and they were like just presented themselves very well, then I've already completely changed how that conversation's going in my head. So anything that might have annoyed me with the other person is a quirk. It's funny. It's cute. I like it now. And so, there's a whole cognitive dissonance there that's associated with the value markers. It's not something that doesn't exist in these relationships. You have to attribute some sort of value, and it's all determined by what do you perceive as being valuable. It may not be economic. It may be something entirely different, but there is something, some trade that you're looking for when you're looking for those sort of relationships.
Yeah. Well, I've seen articles on that too, where they say it's love is really the accumulation of your chemicals feeling good. You know, when you're around somebody, like if you're around someone and you feel good when you're around them for whatever reason, maybe it's a nice day, maybe your team just won the Super Bowl, whatever it would be, but they happen to be near you, then you draw an association with that person as well. And if the next time you see them, similarly things are going well, then you draw until more and more, then all of a sudden you start
conditioned feeling.
Yeah, the condition, right. Oh, I'm with that person. I feel really good when I'm around them.
Don't you think that's why primitive man started giving flowers to primitive women? Like, this will make her feel good.
If there were ever primitive men and women.
This will make her feel good, and then she'll look up and see me.
Only the gatherers. My ancestors were out hunting.
I'm going to give some dissonance to Christopher's cognitive and point out that we are on a podcast. You've heard how wonderful Christopher thinks and articulates. If there's any girls out there, you can reach him at.
So here's an idea. Christopher, how many people would you say you trust right now to hook you up with an arranged marriage.
Oh, that's a scary thing.
That's not
'Cause
scary
now it's
because you
real?
love them and trust them, and they love and trust you.
Oh, okay. So,
One hand or two hands?
so can I qualify before
Yes.
okay. The reason I'm hesitant to give that trust to anyone is because my formation of thought is not so dogmatic as to know my ambition. Like religiously, like I feel strongly about some things, but I also look and I see people on either side of these large issues that I respect highly, that I think have spent the majority of their lives thinking about these things, that disagree. And so I haven't determined where I fall on either side of those issues. And until I know for sure, I don't think anyone could adequately. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, you'll never get there, Christopher. So we're all
Yeah.
on that boat, right?
So agreement on issues would be a value in the partner.
That'd be a very significant value. Yeah.
Do you think you?
But
is
if
it
you
possible-
disagree, does that mean and you find out
Because I'm
afterwards?
strong-headed. I'm belligerent. So I feel like I would butt heads with somebody a lot.
So that value might be more important for you subjectively than it is objectively.
Yeah. So there has to be like really good agreement or really good debate skills. So one or the other.
I feel like arranged
And a lot of
dates
grace.
for Chris would be a great podcast.
Okay, but we were talking about it would. But we were talking about every date, every courtship system compares qualities in the person.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you are the best equipped to know what your own qualities and characteristics are? Or would your parents be better at it? Maybe not your parents in
or
particular.
someone in your
but,
community.
But that seems to be the question in arranged marriages is if we take it as granted that we're comparing people's characteristics, who's best to judge those?
I would say today, yes, there are other people that know me better than I know myself. Or as well as or better than I know myself. Looking back 5 to 10 years ago, thereabouts. No, I wouldn't give anyone that trust back then. I was a very different person, and I didn't put out who I was. I kept a lot of walls and masks and didn't really let on like how I was thinking or feeling about things. And so people's perception of me was very different than the things I actually felt a lot of times.
Well, you were a kid then, and also as you've
Exactly.
gotten older,
That's true.
and when you get married, you're going to change, right?
But
You guys
Yeah,
change.
I mean,
as
you
soon as
can't
get
be
married
blamed
again.
for when you're 14 years old listening to Sunny Day Real Estate and Desk Work Professional, and that's wearing black all the time. That's different kid.
Exactly. And what I would say though is that at that same time, and excuse you, Tobin.
Yes,
Sorry,
I
hope
rolled
you're-
away from my microphone.
I wasn't sure if I should say bless you or what because you didn't sneeze.
You should have turned off my mic.
I should have. I don't know which one it is right now. Yeah, but I've completely been derailed from my train of thought. I was going to say, so even though
I strive for perfection.
I didn't output my input to everyone else and show them how I felt about things, and I lied and I kept all that behind a wall. I'm not necessarily sure that means that I shouldn't have relinquished over that power at that time, because they knew what was better for me in spite of what I thought I wanted.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different argument altogether, because love isn't just about the attraction. It's about the communication of value over time and whether or not you can have devotion.
How are you still single?
Yeah, I was going to say, you should listen again to that. Rabbi Zacharias I, Isaac, take thee, Rebecca, again, now that you're older.
Okay.
You'll appreciate what he says, I think. But go ahead.
Here's my arranged marriage story is because I was going to tell you, I think I was going to go here, and then Christopher let us down on that long thing.
We're back. Okay.
That's one of the tools. That's the common topic of memoria is being able to hold what you were going to
Oh,
say
there's your tie-in. All right, I want to hear the story.
carefully enough that you can listen to somebody else's story that's longer than you think it's going to be without getting annoyed at them.
And still remember your story.
Right? Because you're not
Chris is
losing
hanging
hold
his
of
head right now.
because you're not losing hold of what you said. you know.
brutal honesty.
I think there are ways that classical tools help us have more loving discussions. Because I was listening to you the whole time.
Yeah, and you were attentive.
Instead of hanging on to what I was going to say. I knew
Arranged marriages.
Yeah. All right. So arranged marriages.
You didn't forget while I was talking. Why do you think he's going to forget
Yeah.
now?
He thinks I'm going to forget while I'm talking.
I can't wait. It's not on him. It's on me. I mean, anticipating.
So I went to Patrick Henry College for did a 4-year program in 5 years, and
great.
it was an education.
Compared to a 5-year and 4.
Yeah, I like that. It was an education that I am grateful for every day. It was a terrible dating atmosphere because when you get a lot of very conservative homeschool kids together. Not even a lot of them. I'm talking like 300. There were 300 students on this campus.
Wow.
I was in the freshman class that bumped it over 300. Everyone was amazed. So when you have that number of these very conservative kids, they're kind of like I heard it all the time. When I would ask a girl out, she would first say, let me get back to you.
Huh.
And then when she got back to me, it was always the same thing. It was, I know you have good intentions, but I'm just not ready for that right now. It was some variation of that.
And you just wanted to have coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever consider, like, maybe, I don't know, you should get a haircut or something like that?
No, because it was other guys too. I should say.
Okay,
this
so it
was
wasn't
a
just
common.
you.
This was a common experience amongst guys who asked girls out. I mean, they might have been using that vernacular, because of my haircut, but other good-looking guys did get this too.
So
William says the same thing about King's College now, that it's hard to ask a girl out because then it's like a marriage.
they expect too much,
Right? And so there's got to be some way to be able to at least meet each other and say hi.
Because they're kind of so afraid of dating, but their parents aren't arranging marriages for them, that now we're just kind of in this weird no man's land.
So you had like I Kiss Dating Goodbye, which kind of split things in the middle and caused a lot of harm. And maybe some people, the principles weren't bad, but carried the extreme. It ended up with a lot of people who were scared of the commitment or scared of just going out on a date.
I think this was one of the arguable harms of that book. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
all right, we're going to save that book for another topic. Okay.
I like that.
So, but your point was.
So my story is there was one girl who was this beautiful girl that saw the first week I was there, who and she got up at the freshman talent show and sang, and she had a beautiful voice, and she had brown hair down to her waist, and it was like a homeschool thing.
Down to the way Rapunzel.
Like Rapunzel hair. And after that talent show, I walked her back to her dorm. I was being very friendly the next week, and then she eventually stopped. She saw me coming one day and said, "You know what? I might have misled you. I am betrothed to somebody, and I'm very much in love with him, and I just don't want to be misleading you." And it was like, oh, okay, that's a little weird. But for
she used the word betrothed?
Betrothed.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but then for the whole time there, I had a lot of classes with her. And amongst this group of people that were very awkward around members of the opposite sex and so afraid of accidentally flirting with them that they didn't really have conversations with them much at all, this girl was one of the most fun people on campus. Because
she knew what her commitment was.
There's no pressure.
She knew what her commitment was. She was able to have fun and joke around with guys because they all knew that she wasn't going to marry them.
So tell all your daughters to just say I'm betrothed first week. And then when they really like the guy, they can say, okay, I'm unbetrothed.
I was just kidding. That's terrible.
There was another girl in the talent show who did a ceremonial karate performance. So that kind of had maybe some of the same impact.
Oh, man.
All right, guys, we're going to be out of time soon. So I want to end with a question that I sent you. I would like you, I guess, Christopher, if you have a way to jump in, feel free. But it is Valentine's month. Can you say something really nice about your spouses and why you love them or how they love you, or just something that you're very happy about?
I'll go first.
Okay, go first.
Yeah. As the bride of Christ, I love my spouse a lot. He's great.
Oh my God. And because that was one of my questions is how do men relate as being the bride?
I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Okay, well, answer that one. We can take a couple minutes because you are the bride.
But I can't answer to the spouse thing. But I would say in the relationships that I have with my siblings and my parents, that it's one of those things I value immensely, and it's one of those things I don't think about often, but I know it's there. It's present, right? There's this desire for good in each other's lives that transcends any feelings we have at any time for each other, and it's valuable. It's something you can look to and feel comfort. So
good.
Yeah, that's really good. So my wife is one of the most patient people I've ever met. And it's good because I'm not an easy person, I think, to be married to.
She has 5 kids, not 4.
Well, sort of. Yeah. She's got 4 kids and like this maverick, wandering, weird guy who's, not always great with emotions and stuff. So, I try really hard at Ephesians 5 and I don't always do very well. And she's mostly because I'm selfish, but she's great. And like you said, we have 4 kids. So obviously I've done something right at some point along the way. But we have, I would say the thing that I appreciate the most about my wife is how thoughtful she is. I'll give you an example of that.
Please, stories.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 quick stories. Yeah, one from when we were dating and one from like last year. So it's gone throughout. But she gives great gifts. Like when we were dating for my birthday one year, she got me a box of Lucky Charms, and we're poor college students, right? But she had don't laugh.
No, that's a good present.
Story. It was a good present, but it gets even better. You know why? Because when I opened it up.
It had a box of Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
No, shut and stop. It was all marshmallows. She had gone through 2 boxes of Lucky Charms, picked out all the marshmallows, and like put them all in one bag and then resealed it up.
That's love.
That's love. And so I thought that was great. And then I was like, okay, marry me. So she did.
Did you spell your proposal in alphabets?
I'm not that romantic. That would have been really romantic, yeah. But then last year, there's an author that I love his books, and she spent months on eBay getting the whole leather-bound collection. His name's Louis L'Amour, and he's a very popular author. And so she got all but 8 of his books, he's written 130 books in this set. And so she completely surprised me with them. And now I have them displayed. And it was a blast hunting down the last 8 books on eBay and Abe Books and looking for them online. So she was really, really cool. So she gives these great gifts. And I makes me look bad because I give her gifts. Like I recorded a CD of me singing, love songs. Your Body is a Wonderland by John Mayer and Boyz II Men, I'll Make Love You, and I made her think for 4 hours on Christmas morning that was the only gift she was going to get. And here she's got me like this really nice elaborate thing. So she's very patient with me, and she's fantastic.
How many years have you been married?
It will be 15 years here in May. 15 years.
They're all the bad hump years. Those first 7 to 10.
Yeah, I'll tell you
You're
what.
going to make it now.
It's work. It definitely is. It's really good, but it's a lot of work. And so we've. I will say the other great thing about her is she's always encouraging us to do better and to push forward in our relationship. Like we're taking a course right now at our church, a marriage course, and we've been through several other ones as well. So it's good. Really good. There you go.
That's good.
And how many years have you been married before you tell your stories?
7. It's 7 this month.
7.
Yeah. So one thing I appreciate about my wife is, and it's opportune that this is happening now, because actually converting from Protestantism to Orthodoxy was a stressful thing on our marriage, because my reasons for just to put it long story short, my reasons for being uncomfortable in one world were not reasons that everybody shares. And I thought that they were. And so the conversation was kind of based on, hey, we found this other culture where you don't have
whatever that
X,
is.
Y, and Z that are problems that plague our existence every week. They weren't a plague on her existence. So it had this that led to, there was a very unwelcome realization.
Yeah.
The way that I unveiled that, and that led to a lot of unpleasantness, and me feeling like my needs aren't being met, and her feeling like I'm not sharing my needs with her, and just a lot of bad conversations. Because when you reach that point in some kind of a spiritual need, you're not really. It's hard to wait around and go slowly. And so we had, let's see how many years it was. We had at least 4 years where things were very tense as a result of this slow changeover. And, but she never stopped loving me, or has never stopped. We never stopped loving each other because we stayed together, and love is commitment. But what I mean to say is she never stopped being in love with me over that time that I was turning her life upside down with this sudden news and with my impatience.
That's nice you recognize that.
Well,
did you at first, or did it take a while?
Oh, yeah, it took a while. I think if we'd had this podcast last February, I wouldn't have.
It's really good.
That's great that you recognize that. Thanks, Tina.
You're her lobster.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That's a Friends episode. Phoebe's a lobster's mate for life.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I am.
There we go.
I mean, you couldn't have gone with dolphins or
or swans or something else.
Yeah, lobsters.
So I'll share because a few things about Rob. Most of them are short. He is a very quiet man. For the first 15 years of our marriage, my aunt, who I'm close to, kept saying I wasn't married. Or she'd say, "Where's your man of mystery?" Because he just didn't show up to family events. And partly that was because we were so poor he couldn't take off and afford the airfare or the travel. And then, of course, he's a quiet guy, so he didn't really care either. He was glad to stay home.
Can I just interject?
Yes, of course.
That Rob Sr. is the person who, no matter how early you get to work,
he's already
there, and it's about quitting time for him, actually.
He's been there 8 or 9 hours.
And I don't think it's insomnia. I think it's because he's he prefers the quiet to work in.
He does. He's at least quiet. But I love him to death. And so the first couple of years, of course, you have that honeymoon period, and things were going great. And I didn't really notice that he didn't tend to give any kind of celebratory activities during traditionally romantic occasions like Valentine's Day. And probably our 3rd or 4th year in, nothing happened. And I went to him. I was pretty mad. And I said, "You didn't give me anything for Valentine's Day." And he said, "Well, do you want me to give you surprises when all the other men are doing it? Or do you want me to really surprise you and do it when no one else is?"
That's such a great line.
And I thought about it. And I, of course, have never fought since. That's exactly what you want. And I realized he'd always done that. He always gives me gifts. Just never on the holidays.
That's great.
He does it at other times.
That's
so
great.
He likes surprising me. So that's really nice.
That's so smooth. That's just I have to interrupt you and tell you that's a great line. But to clarify, he was surprising you at other times with gifts too.
Absolutely. He wasn't like lying or trying to get out of the.
Because my brother got married on Valentine's Day, and their first anniversary, also Valentine's Day, completely forgot. And I just wish he had remembered that line or he had thought of that, because that's Rob Smooth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now you've got that. So, and then for the gals out there listening, so that was for the guys. For the gals out there listening, it took me a number of years. That 7 to 10 years is where I think really marriages becomes really stable, and you know who you are as a couple. And what I realized is that we were never going to waltz. That's not what our marriage was, but that we were definitely in a very rigorous contra dance, meaning that we would both go our separate ways a lot, but we always came back to each other on a very regular basis. And that we're just very different people, and we had to let each other be the different people we are so that we could enjoy each other during those intense times of raising children, dealing with finances, moves, where we had to be together and strong. And so I've just really appreciated that we were able to work that out. And then I'd like to end on my favorite story. I tell people about him. Twice in the Bible, Jesus said that John the Baptist was the greatest man that ever lived. And I haven't found it yet, but I'm sure at least once it's in there where it says Robert Bortins is the greatest man that ever lived. And so with that, I thank the Lord for the three of you and for your spouses and spouses-to-be. Lift her up, whoever it is. And thank you for the podcast. So it's off.